Hello again, I am Blunty, and today it's time to tell you about the new Action Cam, which is Sony's hat in the ring of the party that GoPro started. And while I'm cringing at my own mixed metaphors there, if you didn't see it the first time around, now might be a good time to pause this video and check out my unboxing of the Action Cam for a good look at what comes with it in the box, and of all the accessories that launched alongside it. Because here I just want to jump straight into breaking down this fisheye point of view camera. The hardware is very, very small, ridiculously light, slim, simple, and with just a few buttons. And while the GoPro went for a flat, wide shape, the Action Cam, like a few other similar cameras, has gone for a more aerodynamically long and slim shape. Each approach has its own benefits, and neither is really intrinsically superior. Around the arse end, there's a door where the record button lives and a lock switch to prevent accidental button presses. Under it is the media slot for a micro SD card, and pleasantly a 4GB one comes in the box, and it'll get you between 30 minutes and an hour and 20 worth of footage depending on your settings. Good to get you up and running right out of the box. And what I like is that a Class 4 card is all you'll need to keep up with the data rates that this camera needs, which makes it nice and easy to snatch up some big roomy cards for small cash. There's a replaceable battery in a sliding tray, and as I discussed in my unboxing, it'll actually accept two different types of Sony batteries common in their other compact cameras, which is pretty handy because even though this is a brand new camera, the batteries for it are really easy to find out in the world already. On the underside, a flip-open panel reveals some ports, one for USB data and power. The camera comes with a proper discrete charger for the battery, but it will also charge direct in the camera from USB, and it will even run continually from a USB power source if you've got some long-ass recording to be doing. There's a HDMI out next to that, and gleefully you'll find that you get a nice clean full resolution video feed from it, making it ideal for going out to a monitor or into a vision mixer or an external recording device, which is friggin' fantastic. There's also a microphone port should you be wanting to use an external microphone with it, and there's another mystery port there for additional accessories coming out down the line. Now then, I must point out, because of their positions underneath, actually using the USB power feed, HDMI out or microphone in while the camera is mounted somewhere is going to require a bit of MacGyvering, as you can't access them at all when it's in the waterproof case, which is the only option for using it with a tripod mount direct to the camera. Really not the cleverest bit of designing forethought I've come across. It's a bit cat-clatteringly silly if I'm honest, but it's not impossible to work around to if you really need to. The menu system is a little bit awkward to use at first, thanks to the simple LCD screen and limited buttons, but it's actually quite sensible, and the readouts of various settings and what mode you're currently in are very clear and easy to understand. So while the interface is a bit old school, you can get where you need to be pretty easily. You can also adjust settings and trigger recordings from an app on your smartphone too, but I'll get to that later. Inside the camera is exactly the same image sensor as is buried behind the lens of the HX20, which I've also reviewed and came away from quite impressed. But the same sensor doesn't mean the same performance. For a start, there's an entirely different lens system on the front, and the firmware and functions and things like the video bitrate are all going to be different, so now it's time to see how well the performance actually measures up in the real world. The basic performance is actually pretty impressive, especially for a camera that fits in my fist. The image looks very Sony-like, rather unsurprisingly. Things are bright and relatively clean, colours look nice and natural, tone and contrast are good, but I'd like to see contrast and saturation turned up just a notch. But that said, the slightly flatter profile is a good thing when it comes to more flexible colour grading in post. The dynamic range is every bit as good as I'd expected from Sony's superb sensors. Details and shadows are well maintained, and highlights are usually well controlled, although you will sometimes see a loss of detail or complete blowout of very bright clouds and the like, but none of the rest of the image suffers for it. The Action Cam deals with sudden changes in light levels extremely well, and given the nature of how it will likely be used, this is pretty vital. Its adjustments to varying conditions is quick and smooth, keeping things looking nicely natural and without the brightness throbbing or chunkily stepping that many other cameras exhibit. Sharpness and clarity are sitting somewhere between okay and pretty good. The very nature of a fisheye lens and small sensor will always make this a challenge, but things are usually pretty acceptable here. The video compression can get a little aggressive sometimes in highly detailed or fast-moving scenes, which can lead to some unpleasant macro blocking. And sometimes large areas of bright blue sky seem vulnerable to a bit of an ugly gradation transition area. Weirdly, most other subtle colour transitions are dealt with very smoothly. It's just the sky that wigs out sometimes. In dark conditions, an area where Sony's Exmor R sensors are some of the very best in the business, there are no surprises here. True to form, the Exmor sensor deals quite elegantly in changing light and indoors, but there is somewhat of a hard line where things do crash and burn into a nasty noise in particularly dark environments. This clearly isn't a camera for sucking in crispy vid in the dead of night, but indoors and in deep shadow you're going to be just fine. Underwater things remain on par with expectations so far. It does get a bit soft when submerged, but the good news is that there's an interchangeable faceplate for the housing coming soon with a lens cover optimised for underwater shooting for divers, which should bring back the crispness and clarity to optimum levels. Again, by nature of a fisheye lens, the focus zone is very deep, so you never have to worry about what's in focus and what's not in focus, or focus hunting. The only time you'll ever get soft focus, in fact, is when something is very, very close to the lens. While the naked camera performs very nicely, you do get a slightly softer image when it's inside the airtight case thanks to the extra layer of optics, and the case also of course exaggerates flaring from direct sunlight. Unfortunately though, without the case there's no tripod mount on the camera. Fortunately, Sony have designed the case so the entire front panel comes off completely, which will not only let them provide optional front plates for optimizing video quality in various conditions, like for diving as I mentioned, but it also lets you do a little MacGyvering by removing the front completely but keeping the camera secured inside the rest of the case with a rubber band or a hairband or something. I'm hoping Sony will produce a front plate with no lens shield on it at all so I can maintain maximum sharpness and the tripod mount for when I don't need waterproofness or shielding from potential projectiles. Either that or I could just hack up and mod a spare front panel myself. The Action Cam gives you a choice of several video modes. 1080p at 30 for the best image quality possible. There's a 720p 30 mode if you value recording time over maximum resolution, and either 720p 60 or 720p 120, which will deliver awesome looking slow motion or super slow motion video. The slow motion video files are even automatically formatted properly to play back in slow motion, so unlike other cameras with a 60p option, you don't actually need to slow down the footage in your editor. It just plays in slow motion by design. The half-speed 720p 60 looks fantastic. You get that lovely, smooth, floaty slow motion. But as you're not dealing with real-time action, all your slow motion or super slow motion video will be silent. No sound is recorded at all. 720p at 120 frames per second delivers a super fluid quarter-speed video, but the price you pay is some extra noise in the image. Because with a frame rate that high, each frame of video only gets a fraction of the light a regular time video gets, so the gain has to be pushed up, and that gets you extra image noise. In bright conditions it's actually pretty well controlled, but in dim light it's naturally much more obvious as the sensor is working even harder with the scraps of light coming in on every frame. It's not hideous, and in most cases the result is still quite usable outside of professional productions, but it is something to consider when making your shooting decisions. In addition to the standard and slow motion video modes, there's one more way to play with the timescape, because there's also a time-lapse function. It'll snap off 2 megapixel stills, which are perfect for building a 1080p video from, at a selection of 5, 10, 30 or 60 second intervals. It's pretty basic with manual start and stop, but it is very easy to set up and start shooting with. And the results are really quite nice. You get a lovely smooth adaptation to changing light conditions, which keeps flickering and other common time-lapse issues well under control. And in this sunset time-lapse, the first time-lapse I tried with the camera in fact, we can see again that pretty hard limit of extreme low light shooting where noise just gets out of control when it gets too dark, but it still did quite well for some time after the sun dipped below the horizon. The Action Cam only does super wide angle, but you get 2 different options of field of view with the lens, either a 120 degree field of view or a crazy wide 170 degrees. 120 is where you want to be if it's mounted on your head or something, unless you want the side of your own head in shot, and while the 170 degree view delivers a very slightly sharper image, it comes with much more of that iconic fisheye distortion at the edges. And of course a Sony camera these days is hardly worthy of the name at all without some of that sweet Sony image stabilization going on. And it's important to note that you only get image stabilization in the 120 degree setting because it relies on the cropped sensor image that setting uses. And it works quite nicely. It seems to be a little less aggressive on this compared to Sony's other cameras. It's kind of set to stun and not kill. Probably because the kind of shots this camera is designed to get would look a bit too unnatural and weird if too much stabilization was applied. Instead you still get a natural feeling motion, but just smooth out and made a little bit floaty, but not too floaty. even when mounted on a motorcycle on some of the crappiest roads Sydney has to offer, and it has many crappy roads for those of us who prefer two wheels and an engine under our bums. You can see motion and shake is still in the video, but the edge has been taken off of the jitter, so it stays watchable. Even the jiggliest, roughest, most stupidly jittery ride I could give it on the back of a cheap-ass RC car, and it keeps things surprisingly watchable. But to be honest, this test was just a fun excuse to screw around with a camera mounted on a remote-controlled car. But no, this was totally a serious test. This is my serious face with a serious test. One of the bigger issues I hit was fogging while in the sealed case, and Sony knows this is a problem because they tell me anti-fog inserts are already on their way. And it's worth noting that the GoPro does this too, and they sell anti-fog inserts for their cameras in an effort to negate the issue. So while it's an annoying problem, it's not a fault one can lay at the feet of this particular camera exclusively. Cameras get warm, and warm things in airtight containers can, under the right environmental circumstances, cause condensation and fog up. It's science, bitches! Annoying science that can shit-can a shot into an unusable hazy mess, but science nonetheless. And I only ran into fogging issues every so often, so while it's not chronic, it is there. The other issue, which is actually a pretty annoying oversight, is that the image does not auto-rotate depending on the camera's orientation. So if you have a situation where you need to mount the camera upside down, for instance, your video doesn't auto-flip like it does on most competing products. Instead, you're going to have to flip it in your editor, which costs your time and extra rendering time in post-production. I'm hoping as hard as a man can hope that this issue is something that can be addressed in a firmware update. Even if it has to be a manual switch in the menu, I really want that option. One of the coolest tricks the Action Cam has though is a built-in Wi-Fi access point, which when tied with a smartphone app which runs on either your iPhone or an Android device, will let you get at and change your video settings, your lens angle setting, the image stabilization setting, and even switch between video mode and time-lapse mode, and stop and start recordings. And best of all, it also gives you a surprisingly smooth live view. The live video feed does hiccup here and there for a moment, but it's easily smooth enough to monitor the video properly and make sure you're getting in frame the things you want in frame when you're mounting it on a helmet or a vehicle or whatever. And while this version 1.0 app works okay, it was a little buggy, sometimes even failing to bring in the video feed at all. But this is the first whack at it, and things will get better, of course. In future updates, I'm told the app will also deliver even more functionality and new features like being able to take full advantage of the complete resolution of the image sensor and take 8 megapixel stills. You can also use the app to download the videos you've just taken directly to your mobile device so you can check them out there, or even upload them right there and then. Using the Wi-Fi will impact your battery life though, so use it wisely and only when you're setting up your shots, and then turn it off again till you need it next. And on that rather important note of battery life, things are actually pretty impressive here. You'll get somewhere around 3 hours per battery without crunching on the Wi-Fi. But of course the thing about the Action Cams is not only do they have to perform well as a camera in their own merits, but they have to be tough. They have to survive all kinds of abuse and falling off things, and if you're wearing it and you crash to the ground, or you're in a rally car or something and a rock hits it right in the front of the lens and stuff like that, it has to survive that stuff, because it's no good having one of these things if you have to replace it every time it gets hit by a rock. So that's what I'm about to do now. It's time to put it through its paces. Let's chuck some rocks at it. You'll have to forgive me for my poor aim. I can't even remember the last time I had to throw a rock at a little target. Turns out it's one of those skills that atrophies if you don't use it. And to be honest, after a few misses I got a bit frustrated and decided to give the camera a bloody good kick instead, which it shrugged off without even blinking. Once I did finally get my eye in, a glancing blow and one full frontal sturdy impact, and, well, once more it didn't give a single crap. I could have been throwing wiffle balls at the damn thing for all the camera cared. Not a single dropped frame of video, not one glitch, no static, no black frames, nothing. It just kept rolling as if nothing had happened at all. There was a small scuff on the case from my first glancing blow, but that's it. If that had happened on the lens cover, I'd probably need to buy a new front panel, but the camera would have still been ticking along just fine. Superb news if you're unfortunate enough to crash while wearing one, or have it break free of whatever you've got it mounted on. Not only will your camera be okay, but you'll get video from the crash. So I kept throwing it around, and that was pretty fun. Hurling it into the air yields video that actually makes me dizzy just watching it. But it shrugged off impact after impact after impact after impact. Until, that is, I managed to hit some paving at just the wrong angle, at just the wrong speed, and the case popped open on me in a case-splosion of disappointment. The worst part is, I was just unlucky enough for the camera, once free of its protective housing, to scrape its lens, resulting in a nasty scuff. In the future, and for you guys, if you're using it in a manner that just may send it skittering across a very hard surface, I'd suggest taping it up or using a rubber band on the case to keep the front panel in place even if the catch gets loose, just in case. This accident was very unlucky, and this was the one and only time the case latch ever failed on me, and I did many more crash tests than I've shown here, and I was deliberately throwing the thing around onto hard surfaces. In quote-unquote real life, and when used properly and sensibly, there's a pretty small chance of this happening, I reckon. But it did happen, and it rendered the lens in need of repair. And the quality of the onboard stereo microphones is actually pretty damn good when you're using the camera all naked like as I am now. But of course if we put the front cover on, things get a lot more muffled, as you would expect. It's a fully sealed airtight container and microphones need to hear moving air to work properly. But of course here we are again with the advantage of these replaceable front covers is there are front covers on their way which have open or semi-open microphone ports which have limited weather sealing. They're not fully waterproof like this case is of course, but you get much better audio if you need to use the onboard audio. To sum things up, even though this is Sony's first stab at this end of town and point of view all-weather action camera thingies, they've actually done quite a damn fine job. It delivers good results, it's very easy to use, and it deals with a wide range of environments, conditions, and lighting circumstances very elegantly and absolutely reliably. There's just a couple of hiccups, but none of them are really deal breakers in my mind, and some of them are already on their way to being fixed with software updates. And speaking of updates, Sony seemed pretty serious about getting a slice of this pie. So there's already more mounting accessories on their way, more case options optimized for different needs, and, I'm told, even an accessory that clips onto the Action Cam and gives you a flip-out screen to turn it into some kind of teeny-tiny handy cam, which would be pretty sweet. Hopefully once the newly announced and still unavailable GoPro Hero 3 camera is out, I'll get to do one of my camera versus camera shootout videos with the GoPro for battle to the death, or at least battle to the deep tissue bruising. But until then, I can only say that I was quite happy with the performance and results I got from the Action Cam. And in fact, many of the shots I captured with it while using it in real-world applications and not in my more contrived tests have actually been used in several of my recent videos already, intercutting very nicely with footage from regular cameras costing 3 or 4 times as much cashola. And as for that price, you know the deal here. Google for it to get the best current price in your local currency. But as I mentioned in my unboxing, considering what you get in the box aside from the camera itself, it's a pretty damn good deal. Thanks for watching, I am Blunty, and I'll catch you next time.